celebrating and showcasing extraordinary people who are doing incredible things to make our world a better place. This is Close Up Television. I'm your host, Jim Masters, and thanks for joining us. On today's episode, we celebrate Dr. Sophia Edwards-Bennett. Dr. AB is a board-certified, award-winning radiation oncologist, consultant, cancer ambassador, dynamic international speaker, best-selling author, podcaster, and CEO manager of My Dr. EB, LLC. Dr. AB is fulfilling her purpose as a practicing radiation oncologist. She also gained her medical and oncology post-graduation education from Harvard's Cancer Therapeutics and Research Program, Memorial Sloan-Kettering Cancer Center, and Cornell Medical College. She engages people on their journey of cancer education, inspiration, and spiritual revelation as she continues to save lives while transforming minds. She's received numerous accolades for her work with cancer patients that include appearances in Top Doctor, on NBC, and in Who's Who. Her honors are significant, but perhaps equally remarkable are her passion, concern, and whole-person approach to treatment. It is something the doctor likes to call the ministry of medicine. It's a style of care that embraces both the soul and body while attempting to heal and comfort patients. Dr. EB, as she is affectionately known, is on an ordained mission to edify, enlighten, and inspire people, first and foremost about cancer, but also about being more complacent with our life situations. It's really amazing work that she does. She's worked with patients and families across several U.S. states, as well as in her native Jamaica, and continues to practice and lecture in many national and international locations. Dr. EB reaches an even broader audience through the internet, where she discusses the big C, re-attitudes, thinking about cancer differently than one tends to, and in podcasts under the acronym REVOXYLIFE, Revelations from the Oxymorons of Life. Her all-encompassing approach to cancer is about offering hope, encouraging a new and more positive attitude, and answering people's unanswered questions. It also centers on treating the untreatable with compassion and grace, as well as nurturing one's soul with prayer, if they seek it. Now, to learn more about Dr. EB's extensive background and how she facilitates this extraordinary work, she joins me today in the Close Up Television studio for this exclusive interview. Dr. EB, welcome to the Close Up Television studio. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for taking time to stop by. We did the radio show and it was so fascinating and intriguing to me. We wanted to bring you into the studio to really delve in deeper to this beautiful work that you do.
Thank you, Jim, for such a warm welcome, and the sentiments are indeed reciprocated. I am honored to be here as well.
You know, I like to go back in time because I like to humanize our guests. We did that on the radio show as well. When you look back at your own life's journey, what are some of the things that pointed you in the direction of wanting to go into such an incredible field as the medical field?
That's a very loaded question, but certainly profound. And I say that because we do live our lives prospectively, but we analyze retrospectively. And so, in thinking about my path and what led me to the field of medicine, particularly oncology, my mom was inflicted with lupus for several years. Actually, she died at a young age of 38, and I was 13 at the time. My two brothers are 5 and 7 years older, and she was in and out of the hospital for a very long time. And as you can imagine, this was Jamaica, actually, and in that era, there were no effective medical treatments for lupus except for what we called then the panacea, which is steroids, right? And so she declined and finally passed. But during the time that we were able to meet the physicians who were in charge of her care, and there were certain physicians that, in particular, I noticed that it was not just about her as the patient, but her as a person. But there was one doctor in particular who spoke to me directly, just I guess he sensed that me being the youngest, I would need a little bit more guidance or information regarding what my mother was going through. And he wanted to also impart hope as well as knowledge about how to proceed, how to process my mom's illness and, of course, inevitably her passing. And so I thought that was really important at the time, but in retrospect, I realized that is an intangible that is necessary for every patient to not only see beyond the patient, but also to interact with the family members to help them to process this information. So I felt seen by that physician, and I carried that experience with me. And my path was from then to where I am now practicing oncology. It wasn't a straight path, but it was certainly ordered by him with a capital H. But that is one of the experiences that actually, I would say, dictated my interest in medicine, and after that, it was all ordered by God.
You've studied at some of the most prestigious schools known, and the background is extensive. Tell us about some of the fostering of the education, which also guided you in the direction of the work you do today.
So, thanks for the compliment. I credit, as I said, everything was ordered and ordained by him, so I credit all of my path and the gifts that I was granted to practice medicine to him. That said, I was introduced to an attending at Georgia State University by a professor at University of the West Indies, because as I stated, I'm from Jamaica originally. So my undergraduate degree was obtained there. And I was working at a facility using my organic chemistry skills. And I received a call from Dr. Keith Pascoe, who was a professor there. He had a connection with he'd established collaboration with Georgia State University PhD program, and they were in search of international students. And so he somehow, of all the students he had mentored, he chose me. And when he informed me of the opportunity, it seemed intriguing at the time. And I mentioned to you that my path was not really linear, it was curvilinear, because I was really interested in medicine. And to be honest, I would have preferred an MD, PhD approach, meaning a combined degree, right, which is offered in the US. But in Jamaica, having my education in Jamaica did not really facilitate that. I would need to be in the US to be accepted to such a program. So, but, you know, again, it was all ordained. So he chose me. He informed me of all the steps, the GMAT, etc. I'm sorry, the GRE, and everything flowed from there. The scores were great. I applied, and I was informed of my acceptance to the program. Now, what's very interesting is that when you enter a PhD program, you are provided with different projects, right? And you choose one that speaks to you, speaks to your interest. And for some reason, Dr. Dabney Dixon presented me with this project, which involved synthesizing intercalating agents, specifically anti-cancer agents, so DNA intercalating agents, and they're anti-cancer agents. So in immersing myself in, all the publications, educating myself about the synthesis and how these are used medicinally, of course, I became quite enamored, intrigued. I literally, my entire frontal lobe, and of course my temporal lobe, which holds all the memory, was just absolutely saturated with this information. And so, interestingly enough, that was also ordained, because I became quite interested in the medicinal aspect. So the application of the synthesized intercalating agents, specifically anthraquinones. And so there's several anthraquinones used in medicine today. For example, doxorubicin, it's an anthracycline that is used in the treatment of many cancers. Also is used in the treatment of lymphoma, used in treatment of breast cancer. So in immersing myself in the medicinal aspect, I became more interested, and my interest in medicine was then reignited. So at the end of my PhD tenure, I now knew that this was the path I needed to take. I needed to pursue my medical degree, and I postdoced while I prepared to enter medical school. So though my desire was the combined degree, this was the path that actually prepared me even more, because I knew the wet lab version, right? So I was being primed to enter the medical field. Although I don't use those agents because I'm not a medical oncologist, I have a different understanding of the full picture, right? The full gamut, because I know exactly how these are used, the mechanism of action of these drugs, even though I myself don't prescribe them. But I also know how they work in concert, how they synchronize with radiation therapy to treat cancer.
That's really incredible. Have you noticed the passion? You're so well versed on this topic, and you're very passionate about it. What I like too, which we see a thread, is that I think you feel like you are a conduit, a facilitator of this energy and this guidance that flows through you, right?
Absolutely. I do believe that. And I believe that we are all created for a purpose. And so in fulfilling one's purpose, right, we feel fulfilled. You can never be fulfilled. And this is not just about wealth or prosperity. This is about being fulfilled, because in walking in one's purpose, then he guides you. If he created you to walk in a certain path, then he actually provides you with all the tools to do so, right? And so when he does that, inevitably you are going to be passionate about it, because when he downloaded everything you needed to walk that path, then he downloaded the passion, he downloaded the gifts. And so when you are one with that, there is nothing else quite like it. So yes, I do believe I'm a channel. I do believe I'm a conduit to fulfill his purpose. So I'm not here just for myself. No one is. No one on this earth is. It's difficult sometimes to find your purpose, but if you do, when you do, and I pray that we all do, because that sense of purpose guides you in a way and it connects you intimately with him, such that he speaks speaks to you, and I do mean he speaks to you. And as I will, expound further, even the book I wrote, he speaks to you in a manner that is so obvious, so profound, because there's a message that he created you, you see, to disseminate to the world. And so it is not, I wouldn't use the word easy, but it is guided. And when you have guidance, it becomes less effort and more natural.
Exactly right, yes. Did you always realize this? When you were a kid, did you know this? Or when did you realize that you were plugged into this so deeply?
So that's an interesting question. So I grew up in church, actually, Pentecostal, which is very, there are lots of rules. And I believe more in relationship and spirituality more so than religion, okay? Now, when I grew up, it was more religion, right? Rules, regulations, what you can and cannot do. Some of those rules are not even in the Bible. They're not biblical at all, right?
Rigidity.
It's all rigidity. But so I would say that I wasn't that aware or in tune. But what I am grateful for is that, and I think that was meant to be the case, that I was exposed to him. It was meant to be. So because he knew that I would graduate from religion to relationship, but I needed the exposure first. My mom had a sense of relationship, though. There were some rules, and that many personal challenges that we faced was mostly because there were rules that she could not defy, right? But I do believe that she was plugged into that vision of God that went beyond religion, and she imparted that to us, especially in her passing, which I think was incredible. He does that when you absolutely need it. He gave her the vision before she passed, and she conveyed that vision to us, and it was unbelievable. We actually thought, and I this is included in my book, because he showed her a vision of our lives, which we thought was absolutely crazy. We thought, the disease is definitely affecting her mental capacity, because there is no way that we could possibly attain these goals without her, because we didn't really have the structure to do that otherwise. And I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
When you were developing the education, you were tasked with being a part of starting a whole new radiation oncology department as well. Tell us about that. That's fascinating.
So actually, after my training at Sloan-Kettering, Cornell, etc., I was practicing, and I was given the opportunity to launch and assist in the development and launching of the center, Radiation Oncology Center, in Jamaica, which, is full circle, right? That's where I'm from. That's my roots are there. All the foundation was laid there. So I thought that was such an honor. I was actually called by the NIH director, and he was collaborating with the Ministry of Health in Jamaica at the time. And so for me, it was such an honor for so many reasons. As I stated before, and I had a team. It wasn't just me, so it was all a team effort. Physicists, and we trained the dosimetrist. I was able to train residents as well, and develop the center from before we started seeing patients. That literally at the inception, not changing the culture once the practice was already established, but from even prior to that. So the beginning stages where we're designing the clinic room, etc. So it was quite fulfilling because not only was I proud of giving back to my country, but being able to establish the culture, I think, was extremely important because we want to be sure that patients are being treated in a way that reflects my principles and my tenets about how cancer patients should be treated, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But seeing the patient is not just the cancer, but beyond that. As I mentioned before, that physician I met when my mom was sick, he saw beyond that, and I do believe it's important. And patients actually feel that, you know. Many of us believe that patients are not perceptive. They really are, and they feel that. They feel that inside. They know. They walk out of the room. That's what I want. When a patient walks out of the room, they should feel different. There should be something about that interaction that when they walk out the room, they feel there is something new that has been deposited within them.
And they're heard and they're understood.
They're heard, they're understood, so that, and again, I see my patients once a week, every week, or even more often if they need to see me. So this is a constant infusion, right? It's not just one consultation. It's a constant infusion of these principles, of these tenets, of the big C attitudes, which I'm sure we'll address. And so doing that project in Jamaica, it helped me to understand more about what I have to offer as well. It was an honor. I was totally excited, but the actual establishment, the actual ins and outs, the tangibles and the intangibles, all of that actually culminated into the launching, which also reflected everything that was deposited during the training process. And I am absolutely proud. But again, it was a team effort for sure. It was a team effort for sure. It was a team effort. So I credit my entire team. Yeah.
How do you, it sounds like you're very invested in the patient at deep levels. I've asked this question of other physicians, EMTs, firefighters, police officers, nurses. How do you reconcile the task at hand and then the emotional side of seeing this person as a human who is going through various things? How are you able to, if you're dealing with this so much in your own life, so many people that have so many situations going on in their lives where they're coming, searching out hope and healing, how does it not overwhelm you?
That's a great question. So first, I think you do need support. My husband is great at that. I have much support in him, but more so than my husband, as I stated, when you are divinely ordained to tread a certain path, I believe that he does give you everything you need. And I think my husband was a part of that gifting, right? But also, I do believe that he allowed me to procure this level of training. And believe me when I say Memorial Sloan-Kettering, as you know, is arguably the #1 cancer center, and the training there, it's I believe it's unmatched, honestly. But I mean, someone could say differently from MD Anderson, but it really was good training. And what it does for me, it allows me to not necessarily concentrate so much on what I plan to do, because many times when you are faced with a cancer patient, right, there has to be a treatment plan, right? But the training and my experience of over 15 years, I don't want to say effortless, but I want to, what I would say is that I am prepared. So I don't need to necessarily concentrate. I mean, there are obviously patients who have more rare cancers, and then of course you want to be sure that you are being a little bit more creative, and also we have peer review. And to be honest, the great thing about training at Sloan-Kettering is that I can contact them at any time if I need to, and they'll answer immediately. So I always have access to Sloan-Kettering, which is absolutely, and my mentor, Aki Ahalam in particular. But how do I reconcile is that I apply the knowledge that I have gained from training and experience, but I do not, when I see my patient, as I say in my book, it's my sanctuary. So when I see my patient, I do not see them as the treatment plan that I have formulated and will be executing after they leave my clinic. I am now engrossed in knowing my patient, explaining, of course I do, I explain the actual treatment plan and the side effects, but my focus, because I know my plan, I already know my plan, and actually the contouring happens after the consultation. The planning occurs after the consultation, so I can focus on the patient, because it does influence many things. What we don't realize is that getting to know our patients influences how we interact. It influences how my patient feels about the treatment they are about to embark on. It influences the level of hope that they have moving forward. It influences how they perceive their outcome, what will occur after this. It influences, how they see the number of treatments that we recommend. For example, some patients are being treated for 9 weeks. It influences all of that. But they also need to know that you are invested in them, and this is not just a transactional interaction where, so you were referred to me, and this is the next step.
Tell me in 7 minutes what your problem is.
This is the next step. So you'll find that when I meet my patients, I will first, of course, ensure that they understand what the diagnosis is and what it means, right? But I find time to determine more about who they are. So what they do, right? If they're retired, I ask about family and the things that they're passionate about. And I want to know that because I want to know them as a person, but 2, I want to know what matters to them. Because you see, when you know what matters to your patients, when they are feeling down, and that's inevitable, when they decide one day that, I don't know if I can actually go through with this, I don't know if I can complete treatment, that is when I utilize that information that I've learned from them to then help them to see, because the issue with grief, the issue with with going through this process, the issue with facing your mortality is that there can be blinders where you only see that, right? And it seems like this mountain that you can't climb, this hurdle, this challenge that you will never be able to overcome. And so I'm there to remind them of what they have shared with me means so much to them. Some it's their grandchildren. I can tell they light up when they talk about their family. They light up when they talk about fishing. I mean, there's so many things that I glean from them. And I memorize, I really know my patients, the names of their spouses, if they have spouses, the names of their kids, and what they do, if they're in sports, the things they like about them, the things they're proud of, right? And so I now have a sense of why they want to live, what gives them hope. Because hope, right? Hope is evident. The reason hope is evident to me when I see my patients is because they made the effort to actually present to the consultation. So even though my patient may be stoic and may not want to share, may not be effusive expressing their emotions, the fact that they came, there is some hope embedded somewhere there. My job is to stir up that hope.
So they don't lose it.
Yes, and remind them of why they want to continue to live, to see the accomplishments of their grandkids or whoever means that much to them. So the seed is there. But as Paul wrote to Timothy, when he said, stir up the gift, I'm there to stir up the hope. Yeah.
As part of that, which I think is really incredible, you have developed this 7-pronged approach to living with the psychological side of cancer.
Yes.
And the big C, Reattitudes philosophy is what it is. Tell us about the 7-pronged approach. Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, so about the Beatitudes, right? So it was sort of coined from that term. But the big C Beatitudes, the big C meaning cancer, it's 7-pronged, and it's really designed to address the invisible tumor. So the invisible tumor is the opposite from the physical tumor, right? So the physical tumor is the cancer. We're addressing that with treatment. But what are we doing about the psychological tumor that is growing while we're treating, or even before? Once the patient is diagnosed, everything changes.
Is there truth that, a lot of times you hear, if you have an illness like cancer, what have you, if your psychological being is down and negative and not hopeful,
right,
it can actually make things worse?
Absolutely. And there's studies that actually show this to be true, but also it decreases the patient's compliance. So on a practical level, compliance is decreased, or the patient may just not complete treatment because their psychological state is not being replenished, right? The hope is not being replenished.
It's like a block.
Exactly. And so in my years of practice, I have observed this in my patients. And so I developed the Big C Reattitudes to address just that. And so the acronym is his lamp, right? And the Re for the Reattitudes is actually the infusion of the elements of the Reattitude. So hope is the restoration of hope. So that's the H, right? The I is identity, so the reclamation of identity. The S is self-worth or self-esteem. Self-worth, for example, patients who undergo mastectomy many times, they sense that they have lost some of their, self-esteem, right? So it's the reaffirmation of self-worth. L is the reappraisal of life, where facing your mortality, it really prompts you to reappraise what life is all about. What does life mean to you now that you're facing mortality? Because it's very different, right? And then A is requited admiration. So requited, meaning they admire me, and they've expressed that multiple times. They admire their physicians for what they do. But requited, I admire my patients for the strength, the tenacity, the courage it takes to go through what they go through, right? Because honestly, they're waking up every single day knowing their diagnosis. And many times I really believe that when they're diagnosed, they're waking up thinking this was a dream, only to find out, because we all go through that. We have a nightmare and we wake up and we say, oh, thank God that was a dream, right? But for them, it's the reality, right? And so it takes a lot to go through what they do. And I need to remind them that, because they don't see themselves, that's why they need a mirror. We don't see ourselves, that's why we need a mirror, right? I'm their mirror. I'm seeing what they're going through. They're not really taking stock of their own courage, of their own resilience, what it takes for them to go through all this. So I remind them of that. I admire them, and I learn from them.
And they're afraid to even look in the mirror sometimes.
They are, and it's, as I mentioned, I alluded to mastectomy, etc., right? And the M is the rehabilitation of the mind. So when the mind is corroded by hopelessness, right, then I need to rehabilitate the mind where now they can see a future. Even if the illness is terminal, there are ways that I can coach my patients to actually see a light, right? And also to appreciate life, and not only that, but to prime them to leave what I call a legacy. So you can will all that you've learned from this process of life, you can will it. And I say will meaning, an actual will. You can will it to your grandkids, your children, etc. And then the P is for purpose, and that is the reignition of purpose. And I always use this reference. I did not treat her, so I can't take any credit for this. But Claire, she is the CEO of Feeding America, and she mentioned she mentions on her website. I had the pleasure of meeting her, and she mentioned on her website that she was a big Wall Street mogul. I mean, then she was diagnosed with cancer, and breast cancer, and everything changed. And that is how she became the CEO of Feeding America. And the thing is, when she was a child, this was her goal. She always knew that she wanted to be a philanthropist, someone who helped others around the world, but she forgot about it because, see, the culture, right? The word cult is in culture for a reason. Even we don't think we're a part of a cult, but culture, right? It creates this cult-like spell that dictates that we need to go on a certain path, right? And this is what is perceived as the right path. And she was successful, so you can understand why she would want to continue that path. But that was a wake-up call for her.
The stress, which causes the inflammation, all the internal things happening, doing that.
Exactly. And when she was diagnosed, the light bulb, she immediately realized that what she was doing was just following what was being dictated by culture and not what her heart. As a child, she knew, right? And so she changed her course, and now she feeds America and the world, actually.
It was probably a happier person, more fulfilled internally than ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She knew that, though.
Yep.
As a child, that was ingrained in her as a child. Yep. Yeah. So that's the reignition of
Full
purpose.
circle. Yeah, she had to experience the other and say, that's not really for me to be brought.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens for a lot of people.
Yeah.
With this pandemic, a lot of people have realized that as well. They're making
true.
choices to say, you know what, maybe I don't want to do the corporate thing or what have you. I need to now allow what is inside to rise and shine and share it with the world.
Yes. Stir up the gifts. Stir up the gifts. And meditate. Take a moment with yourself. I tell my patients that a lot. Take some time to really evaluate you, the real you. Excavate everything that is deep, that maybe you yourself have even pushed deeper into your soul because you needed to, just move on with life, right? And there's nothing wrong with moving on, but move on after you've resolved who you are, right? And so I encourage them to do that, especially when they've completed treatment, because I want them to carry with them the knowledge of the strength and courage they have gained. I need them to know that adversity cannot be wasted. Pain should give you some gain. There is gain that can be garnered from pain and from adversity. And I learned that from my own life growing up. I learned that from losing my mother. I learned that it is a way that you can actually convert your life in such a way, or transform into this person that you are meant to be. You're meant to be. And this is what my patients know when they graduate. We have a whole graduation ceremony where, I congratulate them, but I also, they have a certificate and they ring the bell. But every patient is different. And so I always leave them with a parting message of what I've observed about them that is unique, but also never to forget what it took to go through this. Because what I've learned, which is what I've imparted, is that whatever challenge you thought in the beginning, whatever mountain you thought that was too high to climb, or a valley too deep to ever escape, when you have actually succeeded, when you're at the top of the mountain, you have to know that the lessons gained from that experience is to be used to refine your path, inform your path moving forward, so that the next time you face a challenge, that is your impetus, that is now your ammunition. You have that in your armamentarium to say, I can do this because I've overcome. And so I do actually, a graduation ceremony includes that for all my patients. Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, in addition to reaching the patients, you also reach the families. Tell us about that.
Yes. So the families actually now show up for the graduation because it's supposed to be a big deal. Normally graduations from completing treatment has not usually been, but we've made it so the patient's family, it's a big to-do, they take pictures, etc. But I include the patients because and I have a prose about that. I include patients' family members because I do believe they're an integral part. I think when patients are going through, facing the mortality and going through treatment, I think the family members, the spouses, they're experiencing it as well, in a different way, but it affects them. I know that because when my mom was sick, I know that it affects them. It affects their lives. And so I include them by not only imparting the Big C Beatitudes to them as well, but I also, first I acknowledge what they're going through, because acknowledgement serves to remind or to let them know that I see them too, right? Because many times we don't focus on the spouse or the family members because the patient is the focus, and the patient should be the focus, as it should be. But the spouse is not acknowledged, and I acknowledge that they're going through this process with them. I acknowledge how much it's changed their lives. I acknowledge that they're also experiencing fear, anxiety. I acknowledge that they're also thinking of the possibility of losing their spouse or their mother or their father or their child. And for them, that is probably, of all the things that could happen, this is the worst thing they think in their minds that could possibly happen to them, And so I acknowledge that. And in doing so, interestingly enough, they share things with me that maybe the patient may not share. Say the patient is not open emotionally, right? Then the spouse may share things with me because now they are also feeling seen and heard. And so it's and at home, it becomes a team effort as well, because now I have drawn them all into the process. So now the spouse can no longer think that they need to go through it alone, even if they try, right? Yeah. The spouse is now integrally involved in the process.
Because they're worried and concerned that they lose this loved one.
But if it needs to be acknowledged that the physician, I see that, I understand that, I know that you're going through this in your mind, whether you state it or not. And so that gives them a level of trust so that they can share that with me.
Is this unique, your approach, or is this the standard? I think there's a uniqueness to it because it reflects the essence of who you are as a person. I think no matter what you did in life, these elements that you have baked in would be brought to bear no matter what you were doing.
Yeah, so you literally quoted my husband. He said, whatever you do, this would be you regardless.
Exactly.
But that's, as I said, when God gives you a vision and a purpose, believe me, God is, He is omniscient, omnipotent. If He created this entire universe, believe me, He knows what you need to carry out His vision. So it was a terrible experience losing my mom, but it really fueled empathy. So much so that it is not, I could be dealing with personal, struggles of my own, but when I step into that room with my patient, as I said, it's a sanctuary, and I am so exquisitely aware of their needs. I am so aware. It's so palpable.
You feel it?
I feel it. I feel it. And so whether some things can be unspoken, you still know. And so they're speaking to me sometimes without actually uttering words. And so I know that the trend, if it's not just a transaction, but what they're here for is, whether or not they say it, what they're really saying is, I'm entrusting you with my life, right? Yeah. That's what they're saying.
Right.
I'm entrusting you with my life, but I also want you to see me as not just the mass that I see, that you have seen on my PET scan, my CT scan, my MRI, whatever, my PSA in my labs, I want you to see me, whether they expected it or not, because I don't think some patients expect it because maybe they've never been treated like this before, so they don't expect it. But it is welcome, and it changes everything about the treatment. It really does. Even patients who, I can tell you, I've treated veterans, and what's interesting to me is that many veterans and they're going through a lot on their own PTSD, and when I see them, they're not as open emotionally. But that doesn't faze me, and the reason it doesn't faze me is because of what I said earlier. Once you decided to honor the appointment, then you want to live. I already know that. So I know you have some hope deep down, right? So even if my interaction in the consultation is not, it's mostly me speaking, I've planted the seed. So they know that I'm open to any discussion. I have patients who, they want to portray being, tough, so they don't want to admit, for example, that they're claustrophobic because, they have to be macho, etc. And I always introduce that first. If it's appropriate, I'll say, so my point is I want to make you as comfortable as possible. So because you're already going through, this, facing your mortality is huge. So anything I can do to help you to go through this process in such a way that is manageable, anything I can do, either addressing pain or any discomfort, claustrophobia, that is what I'm here for. And also that it is normal. What you're going through is normal. So I normalize the fear. I normalize the anxiety so that they don't feel ashamed, to admit that.
I could share a quick story with an aunt who dealt with bone cancer. And we were visiting her in New York, and the family all around her, and very dear, loving, matriarchal type of woman, very religious. And we were there one evening with her, surrounded, and it was to a point where she really wasn't, there was no communication now. She wasn't speaking. She was just in the bed. There was morphine. And there was some, like a slight moan that was happening a little bit. So there was a Spanish gentleman in the room next to hers in the cancer ward. And he heard that, and then he heard some of us talking. He climbed out of his bed, and he had stomach cancer himself. He climbed out of his bed, and he came into the room, and he went up to her, and then he said to my cousin, because this is my cousin's mother, my aunt, would you mind if I call the members of my church, which I believe was a Pentecostal church, and have them come here? We would like to do, if the hospital allows it, and this is well before COVID, this is several years ago, a little prayer for her. I just feel compelled to climb out of my bed and come in your room and do a prayer for your loved one. And my cousin Kathy, she was funny, she's like, at this point we'll take anything. And he did, and a van pulls up, and they come out, and they go in, and they're speaking in tongues, and she's reacting to that. She's making sounds, her eyes slightly opening. She's, they're calling Jesus, and she's reacting deeply to it. And they left, and we thanked them. And the kid went back into his room, profusely thanked him, the whole family. And my parents, went home, and my sister and cousin and another dear friend, we were there with my aunt. And they went in to change the bedding, and when they were lifting her up, there was a sound, and they called us back in quickly, and her eyes were wide open, and she looked through us. She looked direct. We'll never forget that look. She looked directly through us, and it was the final. And she lay down, and the heart was still beating, because the heart, but she was, the breathing was disappearing, and so the younger nurse was panicking, and the more seasoned nurse was like, no. She's like, well, her heart's still beating. Let's do something. And she's like, no, this is, you know. So what was amazing was, whatever happened when that kid brought the prayer group in, and also waiting for my parents to leave, so they didn't have to see that, I think. And we were blessed with her passing right in front of us. Prior to all of that, you mentioned as far as humanizing the patient for the medical staff. I was compelled to bring in photos for the nurses who were treating her to see of her on Christmas Day.
Before.
Look beautiful. This is Catherine, but this is our Aunt Kitty. This is who she is. And they were so thankful. They're like, this gives us a totally different perspective on who this person we are treating is. She isn't just Catherine in room 405 anymore. She's this loving, vivacious person
who has a life and a family.
And I was compelled to have to do that. I've also done 5 eulogies for relatives too. People ask me to.
That was good. That was actually of
very
paramount
amazing.
importance.
That has stuck with us deeply during that situation of a cancer.
Thank you for sharing that. That will always stay with you. And I'm so happy that you were able to be there. And I'm happy that interestingly enough, her roommate, you didn't mention his name, but the other patient felt compelled.
Carlos came in.
Carlos.
From the other room.
From the other room.
Total other room came in.
And he was clearly led to do that.
And he was dealing with stomach cancer himself.
Exactly, but selflessly, he just felt compelled that this is what was needed for her. So he was clearly led by the Almighty to do that. And I'm happy you shared that, because, you know, in my clinic, I do pray for my patients if they are so inclined, or if they actually allow me to do so. Some of my patients are already, you know, spiritual, so it's not, there's no conflict there. But what I've always wondered about, which is what you just mentioned, when your cousin stated, right? You said she was very interesting. She said, well, we'll accept anything.
At this point,
I've noticed that, and I wrote this in my book, because I know for sure that when patients are passing, they usually call the chaplain, or, you know, there's always some prayer involved. They'll ask the family member. And usually the family member is quite open to that, right? And so here's the thing. If they are open to that at that point, would it be better to include this spiritual aspect prior to passing? Because we know that at that time they're open, right? So including that pre, you know, the where they're passing into the other realm, I think is key. But I know that, everyone has different beliefs, and I definitely respect that. But yeah, we do pray. I pray if the patient is spiritually inclined, and speaking in tongues, what we call glossolalia. I mean, that's what it's called, glossolalia. And so, because gloss is tongue, right? So, I do believe in speaking in tongues, in dwelling of in filling of the Holy Spirit. Speaking in tongues. When you're speaking in tongues, you're actually communicating with God, and many times the interpretation is downloaded. And so, we do that, and that's kind of also unique. I'd like to think that there are other physicians somewhere also doing the same, praying. But yes, absolutely, I do believe in that.
And she had been saying prior to us, before the communication part disappeared, when we would be with her, that she was seeing white, and that she was in a glow of white, and she saw God. She was seeing her parents who had passed before, and her husband. She was saying all of these things, mumbling these things. Beautiful. I am all white, and like a glow of godliness, which was very fascinating to hear somebody saying that. And then they said at the end that, which is fascinating, that the morphine never took effect really for her. So she felt whatever the bone cancer, right? She had felt that. And I remember at one time, because she was in a neighboring state in New York, so I would drive down like every night, spend sometimes overnight in the room with her. And there were times she would want me to like press her back, and I said, no, I don't. I'll call the nurse to do that because it would feel better. The pressure actually, you would think that would hurt more, but it actually relieves.
It's
and
called
then she
gating.
was saying she didn't feel beautiful anymore. And I said, you always have been, you always are. I don't feel beautiful anymore. So and I said, you will always be. Reassuring as much as you can.
As much as you can. Part of his lamp.
And the traditional priest had come in and did a little, but it's when
blessing.
And no real, and she was she was a devout Catholic. Yet when the kid came in from the other room and brought the van of people who were they were singing and dancing, and it was tremendous.
Oh, wow.
She reacted to that.
Well, deep calleth unto the deep, so the Spirit bore witness. That's what that was.
And then that gave her witness. The green light maybe to say,
oh, yes.
Once my brother and his wife leave the room, because I don't want him to see this, because he's the younger brother, and I've always been like a mother to him. I don't want to have him see me go. But the rest of us, younger ones, can maybe handle it. Maybe.
No, not maybe.
But just that gave her because right after that,
she was released, is what I call it.
That press service said, you can be
She was released. She was released because she was already given that vision, but she wasn't released. She didn't feel.
And he must have sensed that.
No, so the thing is, it always fascinates me how strategic God is.
Has a kid crawl out of his bed in another room with stomach cancer, brings him into her.
But you understand that he was placed there you understand. So when you think about
it wasn't haphazard.
Oh, absolutely. Nothing about God's plan or will is. It's just, it's all strategic. He had no clue, by the way, that he was being placed there for that reason, and neither did she, and neither did you. But it was all strategic, and many times we are questioning why and how, and he has it all planned.
Just let
all
it happen.
of that.
Yeah.
And exactly. And that is that is just an example of how strategic God is. It's amazing. It's so incredible. So incredible.
I thought you'd appreciate that story because it sounds similar to just your way of
It is absolutely
operating.
true. Absolutely true. That is amazing. Yep. He placed him right there. And when the time was right, he gave her a vision and he knew what was necessary. This is now insert Carlos because this is what's going to be necessary. It had to be Carlos.
Right.
It could not be the priest.
It wasn't the priest.
It had to be Carlos. Yes, absolutely. And all of that was planned, but no one knew the plan. You never know the plan before it actually, the spiritual, it's a reality in the spiritual world, you see, but it's not a reality in the physical. What he creates, right, it's there already. It's just meant to be transferred into the physical. So it's there waiting to be enacted, right? If we hear him and if we listen to him, it will be exactly
She
so.
heard him.
And she heard him. Yep.
Which leads me to something really fascinating. It's a beautiful segue, actually, to the ministry of medicine. Kind of like what we're talking about now. Let's talk about that, how you developed that.
So I believe, as I think has been the thread in this entire discussion, and because I don't consider an interview, it's a discussion, right? Very profound, is that medicine, yes, it is a profession, but I believe it's a ministry because we think of ministry as more so, maybe pastoral or sometimes government, Ministry of Health, etc. But I think as a physician, the profession of medicine is also a ministry because we are there not just to treat the cancer, but to also offer guidance and counseling. It's under the umbrella of ministering, right, to the patient. And I wrote a prose about I'm describing exactly that, the ministry of medicine. I don't know if we have time.
Sure we do, yeah.
To
and it's in this book that she's referring to,
yes.
Which is an incredible book, The Path to Soul.
Thank you for saying that.
Community.
Thank you for saying that.
Soul Currency for Life, and The Big C with Dr. E.B.
Dr. E.B., yeah. So the first half of the book is my path, and then the second half is just speaking to my cancer patients and their family members. So I speak of soul currency as currency that is exchanged, right? So we all exchange currency, and there are several currencies. Of course, his lamp, they're all currencies. Hope, right? That's a currency that we want to instill in our patients. I refer to the Ministry of Medicine for medical professionals as a soul currency as well. So I don't know how much I can read of this, but I need to complete it to really convey the essence of the Ministry of Medicine. So this is on page 104. In the profession of medicine, and I write in prose, by the way.
You do,
so,
yeah.
Okay, because I believe it's more easily digested if it has, a rhythm. There's some cadence to it, right?
Yes, a lot of quality.
Oh, thank you. In the profession of medicine, there are certain unspoken rules. I speak not singularly of the formal profession, but the actual act of the practice and execution thereof, what it supports, how it comports, what it maintains, and to what it pertains. Herein is the plain and simple truth. The profession of medicine is not pristine, not by any means, but it requires an unselfish posture, an ever-abiding connection of human beings. It is a professional field that encapsulates the very essence of our mortality, all our idiosyncrasies germane to our tendencies, our spectrum of attributes that fuel our capacities, the genius of intellectuality, the breadth of creativity, the tenacity of our intentionality, the elasticity of our malleability or neuroplasticity, so that the conventional milestone is perpetually transposed with progress and tradition lingers less. So when we meet our patients, we're not just introduced to their cancer, their diagnosis, or their disease, but to their tapestry of perspectives, their present colored by their past, the future dictated by the unanswered question, where do we go from here? And it is within that framework of inclusivity, compassion, and sensitivity that we must strive to apply our practice of medicine as a ministry. Firstly, let's debunk the concept that exceptionalism or notoriety in medicine precludes the act or display of empathy, whether putative, arguable, or revered. In like manner, the practice of medicine should not exclude or require the percolation of one's cultural identity, but instead embrace diversity. And in the case of spirituality, our soul hosts or beliefs in a higher being, not fleeting, but grounded and held in high esteem. And since we're all human beings, there are more similarities that may be apparent phenotypically. So if the feet were placed in another's shoes, a scenario that could very likely be true, what would you do? What graciousness would you desire to be granted to you? So let's connect beyond the profession and the postnominals, or script, statistics, mask, self-control. Sanitization of this priceless gift of human interaction is not the goal. Instead, it's a blessed opportunity to elucidate beyond the cancer of the patients we face, the treasured things in life they embrace. Because in the clinic room is where we commune. It's where we shed the garment of culture. It's where we declutter from impertinent acts of human nature and instead focus solely on the solemnness of life, the essence of our existence. This interaction is transcendent, beyond any preconceived beliefs or notions. Indeed, it summons unparalleled devotion. Face to face, in that space, we are desensitized from hues, creeds, or race. We form a bond that is one of the purest of mankind. And in those moments in time, there, in our microcosm or silo, in that sacred space, our thoughts are intertwined as the preservation of life preoccupies our minds, where hope, strength, and courage are all synchronized. It is this patent, transparent operation and heart distillation that will breach our patient's walls of doubts and fears to establish that bond of human connection. It is in that space, that state, that unabashed and daring place where we not only lend healing, but indeed, healing we too receive. That is the ministry of medicine. At least, that's what I believe.
That's profound and that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Tell us about some of the additional inspirations and purpose of writing this fabulous book.
Thank you. So, I mentioned at the beginning of this book that this was actually a soul demand. And what I mean by that, it was a demand on my soul to write the book. But it was to address the soul demand of others as well. So I wrote this book because there was a demand on my soul to disseminate not only the experiences that I have learned from adversities, but how I was brought through those adversities, right? With God and all the other destiny helpers He placed in my life along the way. But it is also to address the demand, whatever soul demand a patient presents with. It will address that as well. Hopelessness, fear, anxiety, and to really honor God's divine purpose of my life. Because you see, when you read this book, you may think that it was formulated all by me and I penned it. But I'll share this secret with you. When I was writing this book, it wasn't formulated like this, not at all. I was woken up every night, every morning, around 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning, with thoughts that were deposited in me. And I wrote those down, not in any particular order. I mean, the book is framed that way, but not in any particular order.
So you'd climb out of the bed and get right to pen and paper? And
I call them divine downloads. Divine downloads. And it's amazing. So believe me when I say that this is a product of God's inspiration. I penned it, but I tell you the truth. This was divinely downloaded.
Who is it for? Who is the reader?
It is for patients, family members undergoing, it's not just cancer patients. It can be applied to anyone going through any challenges or adversities, which is why I wrote the prose, Why Me? And I wrote in the prose, you'll see, and funny enough, I was not released, and I'm spiritually released to release this book until I wrote the prose, Why Me? And Why Me was the last prose I wrote, even though it's in the beginning of the book.
That's incredible.
And I wrote, yes. So when you read Why Me, you understand that it really encompasses every adversity, any challenge that anyone faces. So I know that it is entitled, Soul Currency for Life and the Big C with Dr. E.B. But it's really the path to soul immunity, and it is for life. but half the book is actually dedicated to my patients and their family members. But what you'll find is that the soul currencies that are embedded within this book apply to everyone.
Which I think is incredible.
Thank you.
Somebody can, anybody going through anything can get something out of it and be enriched by it. You, in addition to the newer book, and a chapter you had in another that was called Higher Ground.
Higher Ground.
Tell us about that.
So Higher Ground, interesting. That's interesting because I never actually intended to write a chapter in Jack Canfield's book Success or produce the audiobook thereafter with a few additions. But at the time, prior to being approached to write the chapter with Jack Canfield, I was actually formulating the Big Theory attitudes. So the chapter was written before I was approached.
Funny how that works, huh? Everything doesn't always work. Just
the chapter was written before I was approached. It was written. I was formulating, and I thought about all the elements, and I really dug deep, to formulate and define the Big Theory attitudes. And I did not have an acronym, and I did not know that it would be his lamp. And I was sitting one day, just sitting, meditating, and do you know when you have a scramble, letters scrambled, I saw the first letters of the 7 prongs unscrambled in my mind. I saw it, his lamp, because I didn't start as his lamp and then try to, create the realities to match that. No. Yeah.
You must be great at crossword puzzles.
No, again, it's divine. I mean, I don't do much crossword puzzles, but I was on in another interview actually, and I mentioned that my mother, again, God actually, nothing is going to, not when he has an absolute purpose for you. It's interesting because my mom was a teacher, and so she was very interested in instilling, many intangibles, but also vocabulary. Right. So, and in Jamaica, I was a contestant in spelling bee, etc. But we needed to learn a word and 5 synonyms for each word. At the dinner table, we were quizzed. Right, my brothers and I.
That's great.
And so that was all a part of his plan too. But I didn't know it at the time. But that is. So when you read my book, I've been told that it could be dance maybe, but this is how I express myself because this is just me, right? So in prose, but also the words I say, these are words that naturally I would describe anything by using those words.
Exactly.
So my husband always teases me because he'll say, just when you think of a word, then pause a little and then think of the other word, the synonym, just like your mom told you to.
Right. Sounds like. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And there are very subtle lessons. There are some obvious, but there are some that are quite subtle, embedded in this book. I actually have patients reading this book, and because this book is, the purpose, as I told you, was soul demand, right? And so, and inspired by him. And of course, there's a conflict of interest. So when my patients are aware of my book, I do not want them I don't have them purchase my book. I actually send them a copy. I provide them with a copy, and I send an email with the Audible, because it's really not about financial gain. It's really about the message.
Right.
And patients will return and they'll say, oh, this is really, incredible. But they also say there's some embedded messages that every time they read a particular prose, there is another lesson that they learned that they didn't really see.
It's an eternal gift.
I am grateful that he chose me. I'm grateful that he chose me, because he could have chosen anyone, but he chose me, and I'm really grateful for that.
How do you work with, because life presents all kinds of variables, or how do you approach a patient who isn't in tune with what we're talking about? You're in tune with it, I'm in tune with it. But they're much more cut and dry.
Yeah.
Give me the facts, that's it.
Yeah.
How do you approach and work with somebody like that?
Yeah, so I'm always, it's called intuition, but I'm always aware of that, and I do exactly what they need. But as I stated, I see my patients every week during on-treatment visits, and there are certain, they don't necessarily have to agree with our spiritual inclination to appreciate his lamp, right? His lamp is for everyone. Now, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. There is a scripture verse that is associated with that, but these are intangibles that I can infuse regardless of whether or not they believe. Because the point is, they're still my cancer patient. They still, whether or not they have my spiritual inclination, they're human. They present with, as I stated in the Ministry of Medicine prose, they are entering my clinic with their past, with their fears, with their anxieties, and I treat them the same.
I would imagine, which is often the case a lot of times with folks that are in the medical community, sometimes you may come across a patient who wants you to be a miracle worker. They're coming to you for miracles. They're banking on miracles. How do you work with that?
In the sense that they think that that they're going to be absolutely cured regardless of the outcome. I call that faith. The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. But I am a scientist as well. So I combine the two. I explain to the patient, again, the studies that have been done, the outcome that can be expected. But as we all know, when we are involved in research, statistics, right? When we present the results, it's all about the average, right? They're always outliers, right? So I, of course, convey that to my patients as well. If the subject is introduced regarding miracles, I believe in miracles. How could I not believe in miracles? I was saved from a car accident in which I should have died. That's a miracle. So I'm not one who doesn't believe that a stage 4 cancer patient could not somehow have a PET scan 6 months later and shows absolutely nothing. Oh, absolutely not. Because again, whatever is impossible for man is possible for God.
Right.
So I would not ever tell a patient, I give them the facts, medical facts. But luckily, I'm also spiritually inclined that I believe in miracles. I know they exist. See, when we read the Bible, we somehow separate what happened then from what is possible now.
Today, right?
It's not a storybook. It's real. And the progenitor is real too. He is real. He never changes. And actually, he told the disciples that they will do greater works, right? So when I envision, if I ever had a philanthropist, right, who decided that they are really impressed, or my tenets, my principles, my clinical approach is, resonates with their beliefs, that center I would create would also, and establish, would also include that spiritual element where there are prophets, there are healers, that God has given the gift of healing, right? So that would be a center on my campus, so to speak. I would treat with conventional medicine, but it would be a resort where my patients can actually experience relaxation, etc. All of those amenities that I wish I could offer my patients. For example, I have this program. I have massage that I don't have time to ever do for myself. So I found a way to credit my patients with the Massage Envy credits, where they can go and have a massage done after, once they've completed treatment, etc., facials, etc. So if I established a center, it would have all the amenities: counseling, therapy, conventional treatment, because I am a physician, so I do believe in conventional treatment. But I also believe, and if my patient is so inclined, of course, then there would be an actual spiritual center. And I know that there is an uprising of the gifts he spoke about. He didn't speak about the gift of healing because it doesn't exist. I mean, Raphael is the angel who walks with you when you perform healing miracles, right? Raphael is the angel for healing. I mean, there are several angels, right? Gabriel is the angel of good news. He's the one who gives good news, to Mary, John's father didn't really accept that news so well, which is why he was, made dumb for a few, the story. But the point is, Gabriel is the angel of good news. Michael is the fighter, right? He's the guy who combats in the spiritual warfare, right? And Raphael is the angel of healing. So when God says we're given gifts of healing, and so that being one of God's gifts, I do believe, and with the uprising of prophets, I don't know if you've noticed, but the Bible clearly states that in the last days, first of all, He will pour out His Spirit upon all flesh, right? Your sons and daughters will prophesy. But what is interesting about the question you just asked about someone not believing is that the Bible clearly states that every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that He's Lord. So the point is that our soul does know that He is Lord, right? Whether or not you confess it now. So that center would include just that. And I know that's somewhat of a protracted, maybe circumlocution, possibly, that I was engaging in responding to your question, but it would actually include prophetic and spiritual guidance. And there would be a separate center for that on my campus, because it wouldn't just be a building. It would be a resort where I would offer every amenity, including treatment, support, side effects, etc., treating side effects, everything that the patient would need.
Is this something that you are
That's
working towards now?
That's my
the
vision.
Creation of this center? Are the wheels turning in that direction?
This is the vision that God gave me. So to answer your question, you being in tune with his voice and his spirit, whenever he gives you a vision, it's nothing that you can accomplish on your own, or it wouldn't be from him. It's always something that you can't do without him. And so, being given this vision, I know that it will come to pass. He will send the destiny helpers. He will send everyone I need, because that's not a vision that I concocted on my own. This is his vision.
Collaborative.
It's his vision. Oh, absolutely. It's his vision. He wants that for his people.
You mentioned if there was a philanthropist out there, and they shared the tenets and the philosophy, and tell us what those are.
So, treating a patient not just as the cancer, but treating the whole patient. All the elements of his lamp being infused in a patient: hope, identity, self-esteem, rehabilitation of the mind, purpose, also addressing the psychological aspect that roars its ugly head when you are facing your mortality, and addressing that in a manner that is effective, not ignoring it and just focusing on the cancer. Also, allowing for a more expansive and also a flexible approach to treating patients. And that includes not just the conventional approach, but homeopathic as well. And of course, the spiritual aspect. So those are the tenets and the principles and the philosophy. And of course, family, not just the patient. So everything that I've spoken about today and all the contents of this book, it includes all of that. And so if there is a philanthropist who would be willing to fund that would be, those are the intangibles, and of course some of the tangibles as well, that would need to resonate and not just on a superficial level, but deep down, something that, as I said, deep calleth unto the deep. So a seed that is planted, even if it's the size of a mustard seed, it will eventually grow. The reason that mustard seed is referenced, because it's one of the, it's a very tiny seed, but when it grows into this huge tree.
Yes.
Right? Exactly. So whether or not all the elements fit, once the seed is there, you can't ignore it. It's similar to me writing this book. Once the seed was planted, even if I tried to convince myself that this was not something that I need to do, I had to do it, because it's similar to Jeremiah when he said, it feels like a fire shut up in my bone. You have to. You literally, you cannot walk with that inside you, or else you'll explode, right?
That's right.
Exactly. And so I am hoping that, and it's not just hope, it's faith. Faith is the substance, right? And so I know that if he gave me that vision, then it will come to pass. And he's the author and finisher of our faith. So I have the faith, and he authors it, and he finishes it.
Do You also have is there another component to this, a master plan to reach a global audience with this message?
The vision is international.
Right.
The vision he gave me was not just in the US. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
He gave me an international vision.
Right.
And there's certain visions that we don't tell all the details because he expands it as you go along. So it's an amazing process that he uses to do that. And when you're in tune, you know, and sometimes when he expands it, it baffles your mind. You go, huh?
Because it can happen, when it rolls, it can happen quickly too.
But exactly. And it's at the appointed time for such a time as this.
Are we making strides in cancer reduction, treatment, advancements in technology, whatever it may be, for the eradication of certain cancers? I used to, one of the blessings I had in this television career and radio career is I hosted for many years an award-winning public affairs program for the American Cancer Society.
Yes.
And we got a chance to really learn about the myriad of different kinds of cancers affecting children and seniors, and just, anyway, I found it so fascinating and saw some of the positive movement happening. For somebody watching saying, geez, are we making progress here? You're on the front lines. Do you see progress being made?
Absolutely. So, as we stated before, I'm a radiation oncologist, so I use radiation to treat cancer versus a medical oncologist who applies chemotherapy, right? Radiation is this black box for most people. They all hear about chemotherapy, but they don't know much about radiation, which increases, the fear and anxiety in patients. But radiation is literally just high energy X-rays, honestly. So if you've had an X-ray, you already know what radiation is. It's high energy because it is used to ablate cancer cells, to kill cancer cells, right? So you don't actually feel anything when the cancer is being treated with radiation because it has side effects thereafter, but you don't feel anything when the radiation is being delivered. So I'll preface the answering your question by just stating that. Now, there are advances, multiple advances, and I'm really excited about all the advances because radiation does have some side effects that can occur, some acute, some long-term. And so we've advanced in terms of technology where patients are being treated with not just 2D radiation, where, for example, if 50 years ago, patients were being treated, say, for breast cancer with a beam coming in, right? And so in and from the back and the front, right? So what we call anterior, posterior, right? Which means that anything in line of fire, right, will be damaged. So on the left, there's the heart and lung, right? And so from those patients being treated with that technology, we know that radiation can damage the heart and the lung. Now, that progressed to 3D radiation, 3D conformal radiation therapy. So it's more conformal, but there is no modulation of the intensity per se, which is why now we progress to intensity modulated radiation therapy, otherwise known as IMRT.
Is that more pinpoint?
So more pinpoint, but there's even a more pinpoint approach. I'm giving you that progression on the spectrum of where we were then and where we are now. So past, present. Okay, so IMRT is more pinpoint in the sense that if we're treating lung cancer, we can encompass the cancer with the dose we want to treat with, and then limit the toxicity being by decreasing the dose being delivered to the normal adjacent structures. That includes obviously the normal lung, right? And then on the left, there's the heart. And then of course, in the middle, there's this tube called the esophagus, which runs from the throat and then leads down to the actual stomach. It connects to the stomach, it's continuous, right? Stomach, then small bowel, etc., right? Okay, now, the esophagus sits right in front of the spinal cord. So the vertebral body is the spinal cord. We do need to protect those structures as well. And so what intensity modulated radiation therapy does is it modulates the intensity. How does it do that? It does that by using what we called multi-leaf collimators. So if you imagine several different beams coming in through leaves from different directions, right? That means, say we want to give a dose of 20, just use the number 20 gray, right? If we have 10 different beams, that means each beam is only delivering 2. So any structure that beam goes through from any direction, it's receiving not 20, but 2. And this is just one treatment. Mind you, the treatments can last for 6 weeks, etc. But not only is that 2 gray less than the 20 gray, because they all converge on the target to give 20, but the beams themselves carry 2. But let's now focus on a single beam, which is in a collimator. Now we can modify that by opening that leaf at a certain point and then closing it. So it may not deliver all of the 2 gray. Now, this is the simplified explanation. Because if you saw that machine and see how, it is. And I always say, it amazes me. Why? Because you could look at that machine, right? We have at the center I'm, practicing now that I actually helped to launch because of my experience launching other centers. We have a TrueBeam rapid arc. And so what's interesting is that the patients are always amazed when I explain the process, because I do, and they see the machine and they're just so impressed, and they're enamored by this beautiful machine and how it's able to do what it does effectively. But here's the thing, who created that computer? Who created that machine? This computer, not my computer, but the computer, many human beings with the knowledge, right? So which computer is greater? And then who created this computer? The brain, the thing we call the brain. So we're amazed at these computers and these great machines, but this computer, who thought of that? Which is why we're made in his likeness, right? He's a creator and so are we.
Every time I look up at a skyscraper or I'm on a plane or I'm driving over a bridge, somebody came up with the idea to create a bridge to go over a river that holds our and a plane that takes us 40,000 feet in the air.
Exactly.
People came up with these ideas.
Yes, exactly.
Inspired by?
Of course. And it was all in the spiritual realm. It just needed to be transferred into the physical realm. But it's all there, right?
It's all there,
yeah. It's all there. Yeah, and so what's interesting about that is that once IMRT was refined, then there is, of course, IGRT. And what that means is we're guiding the IMRT by images. So I'll give you an example. I'm treating, say, a prostate cancer patient. The patient is simulated in the treatment position, meaning we obtain a CAT scan in the treatment position using what we call an immobilization device so that the patient is stable, right? We don't want the patient to be wiggling during the treatment because we want the treatment to be delivered accurately. once that CT scan is obtained, right, the patient leaves and then we start planning. I plan with my dosimetrist and my physicist to ensure that the dose is being delivered to the target, right? And I want the dose to be homogeneous. I don't want hot spots here, cold spots there. It needs to be homogeneously distributed. But I also need to protect the structures that are adjacent to the prostate. So for example, I need to protect the rectum because the rectum sits right behind the prostate. That is why when you go to your doctor, they do a digital rectal exam to feel your prostate, okay? So then there's the bladder, which sits above and anterior to the prostate. There's actually a connection, right? So the bladder feeds into the urethra and then goes through, that's actually, you know, how you urinate, right? It's in the middle of the prostate, runs right through the prostate, right? So we need to find a way to protect the bladder as well. And then depending on how advanced the patient's prostate cancer is, I may have to treat the pelvic nodes. So the pelvic nodes are where the prostate cancer will drain if it wants to metastasize, right? So we prophylax those nodes if a patient is high risk, okay? So in doing so, the field is higher up, meaning it's more caudal, it's more cranial, because cranial is this way, caudal is this way, which means that there may be more bowel in the field. So I need to protect the bowel from long-term damage. Now, the caveat is that we cannot defy the laws of physics. What that means is that there is no structure that is close to the target that will receive zero dose. We can't defy the laws of physics. So that's not the case. But what we do is we limit the dose to limit not just short-term toxicity, but long-term toxicity, which is why, and that's where I work with my dosimetrist and my physicist to do that. There's a lot of, you know, there are complex algorithms and reiterations that we use to develop the treatment plan in order to deliver to our patients. And I always tell my patients that it's not just the plan that meets the constraints, it's the optimal plan. So I could have a plan that meets all the constraints based on the studies that were done showing that the lung can tolerate this much dose. A volume of the lung can tolerate this much dose. But what if I could do better? So if I have a plan that meets all the constraints, I don't have to accept that plan. Now it would be fine because it met all the constraints. But I push until I reach the tipping point. Because if I push and I say, okay, well, I know it met the hard constraint, but let's just, or for the prostate, it met the rectal constraints. But let's just see if we can push a little harder, decrease the rectum, the rectal dose, but do not compromise the dose, the therapeutic dose to the prostate, okay? If we can do that, then that's a better plan, right? So, but if we can't, then I know the plan before that was the best plan. Do you see my point?
Right.
So image guidance now allows us to capture images of the area that we are treating and overlay those images with the images that have been uploaded from the plan that was created. And this is 3D. Not 3D radiation, but 3D in terms of imaging. So, you know, like, for example, a CAT scan, you can see slices axially. You can see slices cutting through here and then through here. So we are overlaying all of those dimensions. So all of those we can see before we treat.
Right.
So it has to be perfectly superimposed before we treat patients, okay? So along with making sure that the setup is correct, we're using image guidance to ensure that everything is perfect before the patient is treated. So that, of course, enhances the accuracy of not just the setup, but the treatment delivery. Now, what we have is agents that we can use to even limit the dose to the rectum more than just the planning, and that is something called SpaceOAR. And OAR is organs at risk. So this is a gel, and I actually was just involved in helping to create a presentation for a meeting to discuss implementing SpaceOAR, or at least having a urologist at a particular center obtain SpaceOAR and the procedure, or learn the procedure so that they can become adept at the skill, so that our patients would benefit from SpaceOAR. So SpaceOAR is a gel that is injected between the prostate and the rectum. And so that now will create a space, right? Which means that the rectum will receive less dose, right? And that gel is just resorbed after 6 months, so it's very safe for the body. So those are advancements as well. Then there is the stereotactic radiation, where patients do not necessarily need to present for 8 weeks of radiation therapy, say for the prostate. What we would do is use stereotactic radiation therapy, which means that we have a different immobilization device. We have high dose, a higher dose than normal, right? But that decreases the number of fractions, which means that now a patient can have 5 fractions instead of 40 fractions. But because it is high dose, right, we need to definitely be sure that we're limiting the dose to the adjacent structures. So we not only use SpaceOAR, but we can use fiducial markers, and they're gold seeds that are implanted in the same procedure as the SpaceOAR, where they place those seeds. We can see them on the scan that we take every day, and we literally can align these markers exactly. When we superimpose, everything is perfectly aligned, and that is how we know that the treatment is being delivered accurately. But all this to say that it's not just the technology being advanced, it's also that in advancing technology, we're able to limit toxicities. And in limiting toxicities, we're able to then improve the patient's quality of life, right? So the advances serve to increase treatment outcome, because many of the advances have, meaning treatment outcome, meaning increasing local control, increasing the patient's chance to live longer, right? So, but also limit toxicity, right?
So there's live longer, but better quality
of life. So, and in medical oncology, I mean, that is so vast with immunotherapy. Our field is just really advancing at such a great speed that patients have more options. So a stage 4 patient does not necessarily, say 20, 30 years ago, may have thought that, okay, after chemotherapy, that's it. I have no other options. But that's not the case anymore, which is why we're seeing more stage 4 cancer patients even presenting for radiation therapy, because once the systemic treatment, second or third line, because we now have more systemic treatments available, once they are proven to be effective, then there are maybe minimal areas remaining on, say, a PET scan that we can now focus on with something like, as I mentioned, stereotactic body radiation therapy. And now, I mean, I could talk forever. There is even a PET scan now. It's actually a PSMA PET scan that is specific for prostate cancer. So that PET scan only sees an area that hosts prostate cancer. So we can actually obtain a PET scan, and it shows where the prostate cancer is located.
It's a fascinating.
And then you can use that to infuse an agent that targets the prostate cancer.
And you thought it was just take an aspirin and call me in the morning? A lot more involved. Before we get ready to conclude, we're making advancements in the treatment of But some people may say, are we making advancements in the eradication of? Like, are we closer to eliminating breast cancer, and there's so many different kinds of cancers, right?
Yes.
Blood cancer, lung cancer, there's so many.
We're making advancements because of many reasons. One, we're limiting because of the screening, right? So screening actually allows us to detect cancer earlier, which means that, of course, the outcome is much better. Two, we have genetic profiling, which means that we can tailor our treatments accordingly. Genetic profiling for some patients also helps us to determine whether they have the propensity and their family members, and so there can be preventative methods that will even prevent them from developing cancer, which we would not have been able to prevent prior to the development of genetic profiling. So we are on our way. There is a path that we're on to eradicate some cancers, for sure. Yes.
What would be a message you'd like to leave our viewers with, who have been obviously very engaged and enthralled with this deep and profound conversation? Maybe somebody that might be watching who's struggling, who's giving up hope, or knows somebody that is. What would be an overall message that you'd like to leave everybody with? And thanks for your time.
Oh, thank you. I think the best way is the last prose that he downloaded within me. And I wasn't released to publish until I wrote this prose. Why me? Because the siren call of hopelessness is always the question, why me? So, if you will allow me, I would love to share this prose. And it's not just about cancer patients, it's about questions you may have in your minds about why you're facing whatever obstacle you're facing. And everywhere you turn, there is no answer, there is no plausible reason. And based on my experience and his enlightenment, I've realized that there are certain paths, there are certain roads, there are certain intersections where he meets you, holds your hand, and guides you. But you may not know that in the state of hopelessness. So this prose is to reassure you that wherever you are, whatever you're facing, however close you are to giving up, just know that at the end of that dark, very dark tunnel, pay attention to that flicker of light, because that is his way of letting you know that he's always there. Why me? Why you? I wrote this book to be obedient to his command, because he deposited within me a decree of soul demand. And without a doubt, I do believe he gave me vision so that I could see that there is someone who really needs to receive these blessed words to neutralize internal conflicts, seeking reprieve. Someone who is in dire need to be told, to hear, or to read this book's contents and to digest, whether now by introspect or in the future in retrospect. So think of this as a colloquy for anyone who, in your darkest hour, has asked the question, why me, repeatedly. The little boy or girl in the midst of or reliving in your mind childhood trauma. The boy, the girl, the man, the woman who feels dejected, having lost count of how many times you felt rejected. For you, the abandoned, for reasons unfathomed. For the hurt and abused, alone and confused. For all the misfits labeled different, yearning to be accepted. For the insecure, for whom to belong is the allure. Or for the gifted, arrested in your potential, not revealing your best, lest you be seen as an imminent threat. For the chosen, called to manifest your purpose, ordained divinely, but deep down, you harbor feelings of inadequacy. Or maybe you're afraid that if you dare to soar, you'll be met with unsolicited abhor. This book is for you if you're at a crossroad where the path ahead you do not wish to trod or take, and everything around you spells confusion, and sense of it all, try as you may, you cannot make. Maybe you feel trapped in a reality that you can't escape. And after all the energy expended is sapped, after the sweat of your brows, masterminding and overworked hands, nothing in your present or future looks even vaguely similar to the life that you planned. And it seems you're swiftly sinking in quicksand. Your mental skyscrapers are all leveling to the ground. And for all your lofty dreams and aspirations, not a mustard seed of hope can be found. Maybe you ask yourself, why me, repeatedly? Because it seems nothing ever goes right. And with one disappointment after another, your days are as dark as your nights. And there's no sense in hoping for tomorrow. So with your mind embracing this narrative, you decide there's no use crying. And your internal soliloquy echoes in confirmation and affirmation. There's no need trying. This book is for you if you're falling deeper in the chasm of isolation, drowning in hopelessness and depression, so much so that if someone throws you a rope, you pause and think. You're reticent, scared to trust again or hope, because you dread the familiar cycle, that cycle of hope later replaced by the bitter taste of disappointment over and over and over again. So you wrestle in your mind as the strength you struggle to find, to seize that rope, to hold on to hope just one more time. You see, the question, why me, is surrounded and confounded by any and all circumstances, past or contemporary. It underscores or intimates what, where, or who in the present you do not want to be. And since your past or present provides no impetus to be otherwise inclined or project optimistically, you foresee an immutable, unfavorable future inevitably. But here's the salient truth that I humbly proclaim. But first, allow me to disclaim that I by no means self-proclaim to be a sage or all-knowing czar. Herein, I simply share my revelation, hoping that in its dissemination, the wisdom it imparts raises the bar of our understanding and elevation. So with hearts wide open, or at least ajar, I beseech you to receive this ensuing statement that I avow, sincerely and with deepest regard. Your present is not your past. Your future is not your present. Stated blandly, is deceptive in its seeming simplicity. But it is profound if examined keenly, understood completely, and embraced with intentionality. You see, the past should not govern in the present, no matter how painfully similar the circumstances of their respective existence. And by said argument, your present is not your future, albeit in chronological sequence, regardless of the bleak days or raging storms or blatant oppression fueling recurrent feelings of deep depression. And I know a blink of light can be outcast by the darkness from the past and all its frustration. But if you look ahead, there's a constant flicker of light in the future, coupled with an invitation. And I know you must be thinking, for one, sounds like a cliche or easier said than done. But for all of us, the truth we believe, whatever thoughts occupy and dominate our mental real estate at any moment in time, profess to be our perpetual reality. For that is, for better or worse, the power of the mind. But may I contend from experience, and thus emboldened with confidence, that who you were is not who you are. And who you are while you still breathe, indeed, is not who you were created to be. So the who that you will be has yet to be revealed. But what matters, what's irrevocably true for everyone, including you, is the actual path from our past to our present and the road to our future, because it is the journey that germinates the commixture of nature and nurture. Whether balanced or skewed, it's the ultimate instructor, because it's on that journey, you see, that you'll discover who you are not, what's important, what's true, what to you means little, and what means a lot, and all the truths in between to discover, not by annals or the current era, not about status, beliefs, or profession, not about decadent vestige or existing culture, but instead the truth about you, this unique, exquisite creature to whom the omnipotent, omniscient one, the progenitor of creation, with his glory and splendor, granted this incredible gift of life in all his sovereignty and providential pleasure. Because within you, there is a pilot light that even in the darkest of night awaits that proverbial match to strike, and with just a flicker, convert to a flame that's perpetually bright. So through the triumphs and failures, through storms, sunshine and rain, serenity or indescribable pain, in moments of darkness or contentment, there is a diametric sojourn of enlightenment, envisioned with an assigned mission to shed the lies, the fallacy of narratives, stripping away the layers, the dissimulate superlatives, peeling away the veneers you've amassed, uncovering the deceitfully tasked, masquerading mask, until, alas, you gain the vision with insightful discernment, illuminated by his light. Hold on to that vision desperately. Don't let it leave your sight, because that vision is the emissary, the ambassador for your mission. It's the first aid kit of hope that will sanitize the wound of sorrow, that will bandage the laceration of desolation, heal the broken heart from the depths of depression, to revive a life of promise, so that your eyes will see in the distance of tomorrow that fire, that light, or even just that flicker to hope for a brighter future, to observe the reflection of your divine dimension, the acreage, the ambits of your potential, the revelation of you in totality. Then, and only then, retrospectively, will you finally appreciate your journey, the unedited, uncut past, present, and in the future, unquestionably, so that when you ask yourself the question, why me? You'll respond without refrain, unequivocally, the only human being I ever want to be is the beautiful soul that he created for his kingdom in his infinite wisdom. So, with intentionality, I will be the bold, the brave, inimitable me.
That was beautiful.
That was long. Sorry.
That was beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was,
sorry. I didn't remember how long it was.
No, I think
Sorry.
our viewers absolutely, I'm sure, are very captivated and moved by that. That's
Thank you.
This wonderful work of art, her labor of love, The Path to Soul Immunity, this exquisite book by Dr. Sophia Edwards-Bennett, Dr. E.B. And this was really wonderful on so many different levels and very deep and also knowledge building, but I think very impactful on so many different levels as well.
Thank you.
Before we do conclude, why do you love doing this work so much? Why does it speak to you? Some of those blessings and joys that obviously brings you.
Because one, I know that it is his purpose for me, and whenever I see that the outcome that it brings to my patients, the transformation at the end of their treatment, it is so rewarding that I wouldn't have it any other way. As I said, purpose and passion coupled is really that sweet nectar. It really is. It's a sweet nectar that the taste is just right. And that is the gift that he's granted to me. And so I love it because of all of those reasons. What it gives to the lives that I encounter and those lives that I touch. It is indescribable. That's why I love it.
You're doing God's work.
Exactly. I'm doing his work. Yeah.
It was an honor and a pleasure.
It was a pleasure. Absolutely, indeed. Yeah.
Continued joy in your life and continued great success in all you do. And thanks for sharing all of this time and your authenticity and openness with me and all of us here, our crew, and with our viewers.
Thank you.
And I hope you enjoy the time with me as much as I positively have with you, Doctor.
Oh, sentiments are indeed reciprocated. It's always an honor, and I'm glad we're doing this face-to-face because indeed, I think I think there are so many similarities between us, and so it makes the four a very interesting and profound discussion always. And this, by the way, just in case you didn't know, or sense, was also divinely ordained.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Absolutely right.
Thanks once again. A pleasure.
Thank you. Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.
To learn more and to connect with our special guest, Dr. Sophia Edwards-Bennett, visit her website, mydoctoreb.com. For Close-Up Television and Radio, I'm Jim Masters. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.